The police officer stood frozen in the doorway. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The TV was still on in the living room, playing a children's cartoon at low volume. A half-eaten sandwich sat on the coffee table. A cup of coffee had gone cold beside it. And on the floor, just past the hallway, lay Sarah Mitchell. She was face down, one arm stretched toward the kitchen, as if she had been trying to crawl away. Her hair was spread across the floor like a dark shadow. There was blood, too much blood, soaking into the carpet beneath her. But the most heartbreaking part wasn't what the officer saw. It was what he didn't hear. No crying, no movement, no heartbeat. Upstairs, in a small bedroom painted pale blue, a baby monitor crackled softly. Sarah's 2-year-old son was still asleep, unaware that his mother would never wake him again. The officer swallowed hard and reached for his radio. "This is Officer James Carter," he said quietly. "We have a confirmed homicide." What no one in that house knew yet, what no one in the town of Riverbrook could imagine, was that this murder would break hearts across the country. Because Sarah Mitchell didn't die alone. She died trying to protect someone she loved. 3 months earlier, Sarah's life looked ordinary, peaceful, even. She was 28 years old, a kindergarten teacher, the kind of woman who remembered birthdays and baked cookies for neighbors just because she felt like it. Her friends said she smiled with her whole face. Sarah lived in a small suburban town in the United States, the kind of place where people waved from their driveways and kids rode bikes until sunset. She shared a modest home with her husband, Mark Mitchell, and their young son, Noah. From the outside, they looked like a perfect family. But perfect lives don't end the way Sarah's did. Sarah met Mark in college. He was charming, funny, and confident. The kind of man who made you feel special just by paying attention to you. When he proposed, it felt like a dream come true. They married young. At first, everything was good. Mark worked in sales. Sarah taught school. They talked about vacations, about buying a bigger house someday, about the future. But after Noah was born, things slowly changed. Mark became distant, then critical, then angry. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. It started with comments. "You're too sensitive. Why are you always tired? You don't appreciate what I do." Sarah told herself it was stress, money, lack of sleep. She made excuses for him. She always did. By the time Noah turned 2, Sarah felt like she was walking on glass. Mark's mood shifted quickly. One moment he was calm, the next he was yelling over something small, a dirty dish, a late dinner, a forgotten text. He never hit her. At least, not at first. But his words hit hard enough. Sarah stopped telling her friends what was happening. She didn't want them to worry. She didn't want them to judge Mark. Most of all, she didn't want to admit she was afraid. One night, Sarah stayed late at school to help a coworker decorate a classroom. When she got home, Mark was waiting. "Where were you?" he asked. "At work," she said. "I told you." "You're lying," he snapped. Before she could answer, he grabbed her wrist. Not hard enough to leave a bruise, just hard enough to send a message. Sarah pulled away, her heart pounding. "Don't do that," she whispered. Mark stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled and said, "You make me do these things." That was the night Sarah realized something was very wrong. A week later, Sarah packed a small bag and took Noah to her sister's house. She didn't leave a note. She didn't answer Mark's calls. For the first time in years, she slept without fear. But Mark didn't let go. He sent messages, voicemails, emails, some apologetic, some angry, some terrifying. "You can't keep my son from me. If you don't come back, you'll regret it. I won't let you ruin my life." Sarah showed the messages to her sister. "You need to go to the police," her sister said. Sarah hesitated. "What if it makes things worse?" she asked. She didn't know yet that things were already headed somewhere much darker. Mark showed up at her school one afternoon. He waited in the parking lot. When Sarah walked out, he stepped in front of her car. "Please," he said softly, "let me see Noah." Sarah's hands shook on the steering wheel. "Not here," she said. "You're scaring me." "I would never hurt you," Mark replied. But his eyes told a different story. 2 weeks later, Sarah filed for a restraining order. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done. Mark was served the papers on a Friday. On Saturday night, Sarah went back to her house to collect the rest of her things. She believed Mark wouldn't be there. She was wrong. The front door was unlocked. The lights were off. Sarah felt a chill crawl up her spine as she stepped inside. "Mark!" she called softly. No answer. She took one step forward. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Behind her. Her heart slammed in her chest as she turned. And that was the last moment anyone ever saw Sarah Mitchell alive. The house would become a crime scene before sunrise. The town would wake up to flashing lights and police tape. And a little boy would wake up upstairs, calling for a mother who would never answer again. But the most devastating truth, the one that would haunt investigators, was still hidden. Because Sarah had tried to leave. She had tried to protect her son. And she had almost succeeded. The police didn't wake the town gently. Red and blue lights cut through the early morning fog like open wounds. Patrol cars lined the street in front of Sarah Mitchell's house, their engines idling, radios crackling. Yellow tape stretched from mailbox to mailbox, turning a quiet suburban road into a place no one wanted to be. Neighbors stepped outside in pajamas and coats, whispering to each other, hands over mouths. Something terrible had happened. Inside the house, time felt frozen. Detective Laura Bennett stood in the living room, her notepad tucked under her arm, her eyes scanning every detail. She had worked homicide for 12 years, but scenes like this never became normal. The TV was still playing the same cartoon, its cheerful music echoing through the room in a way that felt wrong. A toy truck lay near the couch. A folded blanket rested neatly on the armchair. "This was a home," Bennett said quietly. "Not just a crime scene." Officer James Carter nodded. "Upstairs." "Not yet," she replied. "Let's finish down here first." They moved carefully, as if any sudden sound might wake the dead. Sarah's body had already been covered with a white sheet. Paramedics had confirmed what everyone already knew. She was gone long before the first 911 call came in. The cause of death would be confirmed later, but the signs were clear enough. This was murder. The call had come from a neighbor. Mrs. Helen Brooks, 72 years old, widowed, lived next door. She woke early every day and watered her plants before sunrise. That morning, she noticed Sarah's front door slightly open. That wasn't like her, Mrs. Brooks told the officers later, her voice shaking. Sarah always locked up. Always. She knocked. No answer. She called out. Still nothing. When she pushed the door open and saw the blood, she screamed. The whole block heard it. Upstairs, Noah Mitchell slept through it all. When an officer finally entered the bedroom, he paused in the doorway. The room smelled faintly of baby powder and clean laundry. Stuffed animals lined the bed. A nightlight glowed softly in the corner. Noah lay curled on his side, thumb in his mouth, breathing slow and steady. The officer swallowed hard and gently picked him up. The child stirred, eyes fluttering open. "Mommy," Noah whispered. The officer looked away. By mid-morning, Sarah Mitchell's name was everywhere. Local news vans crowded the street. Reporters spoke in hushed tones, microphones held tightly as if sound itself could be dangerous. Police are investigating the death of a local kindergarten teacher and mother of one. Neighbors describe her as kind, loving, devoted. Authorities have not yet named a suspect. At the police station, Detective Bennett sat across from Mark Mitchell. He had arrived on his own. Calm, clean, collected. "I heard what happened," Mark said, his voice low. "I came as soon as I could." He dabbed his eyes with a tissue. Bennett watched him carefully. "When was the last time you saw your wife?" she asked. Mark sighed. "A few weeks ago. We were separated." "Where were you last night?" "At home," he said. "Alone." "Anyone who can confirm that?" "No." Bennett made a note. Mark leaned forward. "Did she suffer?" The question landed heavy. "That's not something I can discuss," Bennett replied. Mark nodded slowly, staring at the table. "I loved her," he said. "We had problems, but I would never hurt Sarah." Bennett said nothing. Sarah's sister, Emily, arrived at the station an hour later. Her face was pale. Her hands shook. "I should have stayed with her," she said through tears. "I told her not to go back." Detective Bennett offered her water. Did Sarah ever say she was afraid of her husband? Bennett asked gently. Emily nodded immediately. She was terrified, she said. He threatened her. He wouldn't leave her alone. Emily handed over her phone. Messages from Mark filled the screen. Some begging. Some angry. Some chilling. If I can't have my family, no one will. You think a piece of paper can stop me? You're making a mistake. Bennett's jaw tightened. Did Sarah report these messages? She asked. Emily shook her head. She was scared it would make things worse. Bennett closed her notebook slowly. Thank you, she said. This helps. The autopsy confirmed what investigators already suspected. Sarah had fought back. There were defensive wounds on her arms. Signs of a struggle. She had been attacked near the front door, likely surprised. She tried to run. Tried to reach the kitchen. Tried to survive. She didn't die easily, the medical examiner said quietly. Detective Bennett stared at the report long after the words stopped making sense. Mark Mitchell was arrested 2 days later. The town watched as he was led out of his house in handcuffs, head down, cameras flashing. Some people cried. Others stayed in disbelief. That can't be him, a neighbor whispered. He always waved. Mark said nothing. But as he passed the crowd, he looked up and smiled. The trial began 6 months later. By then, Sarah's story had spread far beyond Riverbrook. News outlets across the country picked it up. A mother killed after trying to leave her husband. A case of domestic violence ending in tragedy. The courtroom was packed every day. Emily sat in the front row, holding Noah's small hand. He didn't understand why his mommy wasn't there. Mark pleaded not guilty. His defense argued there was no direct witness, no confession, no weapon found. He loved his wife, his lawyer said. This was a tragic misunderstanding. But the messages told a different story. The restraining order told a different story. The blood told a different story. When Detective Bennett took the stand, she spoke clearly. Sarah Mitchell was afraid, she said. She tried to leave, and she paid for it with her life. Mark stayed straight ahead. Not once did he look at Emily. Not once did he look at his son. The verdict came after 3 days of deliberation. Guilty. Gasps filled the courtroom. Emily covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Mark showed no emotion. He was sentenced to life in prison. No parole. As officers led him away, Mark finally turned. He looked at Emily, then at Noah, and his smile returned. The town of Riverbrook tried to heal. A memorial was placed in the park. Sarah's students planted flowers in her honor. Her classroom was renamed after her. But some wounds don't close easily. Emily took Noah home with her. She raised him as her own. Every night, she told him stories about his mother. She was brave, Emily would say. She loved you more than anything. Noah listened quietly. Years passed. The headlines faded. But one thing never stopped haunting Detective Bennett. Mark never confessed. He never admitted what he did. And one day, while reviewing old evidence, Bennett noticed something strange. A detail she had missed. Something that didn't quite fit. Something that suggested Sarah hadn't been alone in that house after all. Bennett stayed at the file, her heart sinking. Because if she was right, then Sarah's murder was even more heartbreaking than anyone had imagined. And the truth was still waiting to be uncovered. Detective Laura Bennett had learned to trust the feeling in her gut. It was the same feeling she had now as she sat alone in her office late at night, the lights dim, the station quiet. Most of the desks around her were empty. A cleaning cart rolled down the hallway somewhere, its wheels squeaking softly. On her desk lay a thin folder. Sarah Mitchell's case. Closed. Conviction secured. Justice served. At least, that's what the paperwork said. But Bennett couldn't stop staring at one small detail she had overlooked before. The time of death. According to the medical examiner, Sarah died between 11 p.m. and 12:30 a.m. The official report listed the window clearly. Mark Mitchell claimed he was home alone that entire night. But a single line in the evidence log didn't sit right with Bennett. A neighbor's statement. Mrs. Helen Brooks. Bennett pulled the transcript closer and read it again. I heard a car door slam around midnight, Mrs. Brooks had said. Didn't think much of it. People come and go. At the time, it seemed unimportant. Now, it felt heavy. Mark lived 15 minutes away. If he left Sarah's house just after midnight, he could still make it home before anyone noticed. But what if someone else had been there? Bennett leaned back slowly. What if Sarah hadn't been alone with Mark? The next morning, Bennett reopened the case file quietly. No announcements. No press. She started with the house. Crime scene photos spread across her desk like puzzle pieces. The front door. The hallway. The living room. The kitchen. Then the stairs. Sarah's body had been found downstairs. But something upstairs bothered her. The baby monitor. It had been on. Set to the living room frequency. Meaning Sarah had likely been downstairs for some time before the attack. Why hadn't she taken Noah and left earlier? Unless she had been waiting for someone. Bennett requested the old phone records. Sarah's phone. Mark's phone. Anything connected to that night. It took hours to sort through the data. Texts. Calls. Voicemails. Then she saw it. A missed call on Sarah's phone. 11:17 p.m. Not from Mark. From a number that wasn't saved. Bennett cross-checked it. The number belonged to Daniel Reeves, Mark's longtime friend. Daniel Reeves had testified briefly during the trial. He was described as a co-worker, a casual friend. Nothing more. He claimed he hadn't spoken to Mark in weeks. But phone records told a different story. Mark and Daniel had exchanged multiple calls in the days leading up to Sarah's death. Short calls. Late at night. The kind people make when they don't want to leave evidence. Bennett felt a chill. She pulled Daniel's address. He lived 5 minutes from Sarah's house. When Bennett knocked on Daniel Reeves's door, he looked surprised. Then nervous. "Detective," he said. "I thought this was all over." "It is," Bennett replied calmly. "I just have a few follow-up questions." Daniel hesitated, then stepped aside. His house was neat. Too neat. Everything in its place. Bennett noticed a photo on the shelf. Daniel and Mark. Arms around each other. Smiling. "When was the last time you spoke to Mark?" Bennett asked. Daniel swallowed. "I don't remember." Bennett pulled out her folder. "Your phone records say otherwise." Daniel's shoulders slumped. "Okay," he said quietly. "We talked. But that doesn't mean anything." "Did you go to Sarah Mitchell's house the night she died?" Bennett asked. Daniel's eyes flicked toward the hallway. "No." Bennett leaned forward slightly. "Daniel," she said, "this is your chance to tell the truth." He rubbed his hands together. "She called me," he said suddenly. "Sarah did." Bennett froze. "She was scared," Daniel continued. "She said Mark had been threatening her. She wanted advice." "What time?" Bennett asked. "Around 11, he said. "She asked me to come over." "Did you?" Daniel shook his head quickly. "No. I told her to call the police." Bennett studied his face. "You didn't go," she repeated. "No." But his voice wavered. That night, Bennett couldn't sleep. If Daniel was lying, then the case wasn't just about Mark anymore. It was about what really happened inside that house. And why Sarah had stayed. Bennett visited Emily the next day. Sarah's sister looked exhausted. Noah played quietly on the floor nearby, lining up toy cars. Did Sarah ever mention Daniel Reeves? Bennett asked. Emily frowned. Mark's friend. Yes. She said Mark trusted him more than anyone, Emily said. Why? Bennett hesitated. Sarah called him the night she died, she said gently. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She told me she was scared that night, Emily whispered. She said someone else might be involved. What did she mean? Bennett asked. She didn't explain, Emily said. She just said, if something happens to me, don't believe it was an accident. Bennett felt her chest tighten. Daniel Reeves was brought in for questioning again. This time, his lawyer was present. Bennett laid everything out. The calls, the timing, the missed call from Sarah. You said you didn't go to her house, Bennett said. Are you sure? Daniel stayed at the table. Minutes passed. Then he broke. I went, he whispered. The room went silent. I didn't mean for anything to happen, Daniel said quickly. Mark asked me to come with him. He said Sarah needed to talk. Talk about what? Bennett asked. About getting back together, Daniel said. Mark said he just wanted closure. Bennett clenched her jaw. What really happened? She asked. Daniel's hands shook. We argued, he said. She yelled. She said she was calling the police. Mark lost it. Bennett's heart pounded. Did you touch her? She asked. No, Daniel cried. I tried to stop him. I swear. Then why didn't you call 911? Bennett demanded. Daniel looked up, tears streaming down his face. Mark told me if I said anything, he'd say I did it, Daniel whispered. He said no one would believe me. The truth hit harder than Bennett expected. Sarah hadn't just been murdered. She had been betrayed. By the man she married. And by the man she called for help. The case was reopened. News outlets exploded with updates. New suspect revealed in Mitchell murder. Friend admits being present during fatal attack. The town reeled. Emily sat in her living room, staring at the TV, Noah asleep beside her. She wasn't alone, Emily whispered. She reached out. Daniel Reeves was charged as an accessory. Mark Mitchell showed no reaction when informed. But for the first time, he spoke. She deserved it, he said quietly. The words spread through the prison like wildfire. Bennett closed her notebook. She had seen evil before. But this was heartbreak led on heartbreak. Because Sarah had tried. She had asked for help. She had trusted the wrong people. And it cost her everything. But the story wasn't over yet. Because Daniel Reeves wasn't the only one hiding something. And the final truth about Sarah Mitchell's last night was still waiting to be uncovered. The prison interview room smelled like disinfectant and old concrete. Detective Laura Bennett sat across from Mark Mitchell, a thick glass wall separating them. He wore an orange jumpsuit now, his hair shorter, his face thinner, but his eyes were the same. Calm. Empty. Watching. You asked to see me, Bennett said. Mark picked up the phone on his side of the glass. Bennett did the same. I heard Daniel finally talked, Mark said, his voice smooth. Guess he couldn't live with it. Bennett studied him carefully. He told us a lot, she said. Enough to reopen everything. Mark smiled faintly. Good. Why? Bennett asked. Because people finally see how dramatic Sarah was, he replied. Always making things bigger than they were. Bennett felt her stomach twist. She died, Bennett said flatly. Mark shrugged. People die. That was when Bennett knew. Mark wasn't just dangerous. He was proud. After the interview, Bennett sat in her car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. Years of experience had taught her how to spot lies, fear, regret. Mark had none of those. Only control. And control meant planning. If Mark had planned Sarah's death, then Daniel Reeves wasn't just a witness. He was part of something much darker. Daniel sat in a holding cell when Bennett returned to the station. He looked smaller than before. Broken. I told you everything, he said as soon as he saw her. Not everything, Bennett replied. She placed a photo on the table. It showed Sarah's kitchen. Specifically, the calendar hanging near the fridge. A date circled in red. The night she died. Daniel stayed at it. That wasn't there when I left, he whispered. Yes, it was, Bennett said. We just didn't notice it at first. Next to the circled date was a single word, written in Sarah's handwriting. Noah. Daniel's hands trembled. She was planning something, Bennett said. Do you know what? Daniel shook his head, tears filling his eyes. She told me she was scared, he said. She said Mark was planning something big, something final. Did Mark ever talk to you about hurting her? Bennett asked. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. He said if she took Noah away, she'd ruin his life, Daniel whispered. He said sometimes people need to be stopped before they destroy everything. Bennett leaned forward. And what did you say? She asked. I told him to calm down, Daniel said quickly. I thought he was just angry. Bennett closed her eyes for a brief moment. Anger didn't leave calendars marked. Planning did. Emily Mitchell sat at her kitchen table, staring at a small box. Inside was Sarah's things. Her watch. Her wedding ring. Her phone. Emily hadn't been able to bring herself to go through the phone until now. Her hands shook as she turned it on. The lock screen photo was Noah, smiling wide, missing one tooth. Emily swallowed hard. She opened the Notes app. There were dozens of entries. Sarah's thoughts. Her fears. Her plans. Emily scrolled slowly. Then she saw it. A note dated the day Sarah died. Emily read it once. Then again. Her chest tightened until it hurt. She picked up the phone and called Detective Bennett. "You need to see this," Emily said. Her voice cracked. She knew. The note was simple. Short. But devastating. "If you're reading this, something went wrong. Mark says he wants to talk. Daniel says he'll come too. I don't trust either of them. I packed Noah's bag. I plan to leave tonight after they go. If I don't make it, please tell my son I tried." Bennett felt her throat close. Sarah hadn't gone back to the house to talk. She had gone back to escape. The timeline shifted completely. Sarah had planned to leave for good that night. She had waited until Mark and Daniel arrived. She had hoped having another person there would keep her safe. Instead, it sealed her fate. Daniel Reeves was brought back into interrogation. This time, Bennett didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She simply placed the note in front of him. Daniel broke down instantly. "She told me she was leaving," he sobbed. "She said she was taking Noah and disappearing." "And you told Mark?" Bennett said. Daniel nodded, crying harder. "I thought it would calm him," he said. "I thought if he knew, he'd let her go." Bennett felt anger rise in her chest. "You gave him exactly what he needed," she said quietly. "Motive." Daniel collapsed forward, his head in his hands. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "But you did," Bennett replied. The prosecution rebuilt the case. This time, they didn't focus only on what happened. They focused on why. Mark had planned Sarah's death. He had circled the date. He had involved Daniel to control the situation. He had waited until Sarah was alone downstairs. And when she tried to run, he stopped her. Emily sat in the courtroom every day of the new trial. Noah was older now. 5 years old. Old enough to ask questions. "Why does Mommy live in pictures?" he asked once. Emily hugged him tightly. "Because some people couldn't let her be free," she said. Daniel Reeves took the stand. His voice shook as he spoke. "I was there," he said. "I saw Mark push her." The courtroom gasped. "I tried to help," Daniel cried. "But he told me to leave. He said if I didn't, he'd make sure I went to prison for it." "And you believed him?" the prosecutor said. "Yes," Daniel whispered. "I was afraid." "Sarah was afraid too," the prosecutor replied. "And she didn't survive." Mark Mitchell showed no reaction. Not when the note was read. Not when Daniel spoke. Not when Emily cried. Only once did his expression change. When Noah's name was mentioned. His jaw tightened. His eyes hardened. Ownership. Even now. Detective Bennett testified last. She spoke about patterns. Control. Escalation. "She tried to leave," Bennett said. "That's when the danger became deadly." She paused. "Sarah Mitchell did everything we tell victims to do," she continued. "She planned. She asked for help. She protected her child." The courtroom was silent. "And she still paid with her life," Bennett finished. The jury deliberated longer this time. Not because they doubted his guilt, but because they finally understood the depth of it. When the verdict came back, no one was surprised. Guilty. Again. But this time, the sentence changed. Mark Mitchell would never leave prison. No appeals. No parole. No control. After the sentencing, Emily stood outside the courthouse, the sun warm on her face. Reporters called her name. She ignored them. She looked down at Noah, holding her hand. "Is the bad man gone?" Noah asked. Emily knelt beside him. "Yes," she said softly. "He can't hurt anyone anymore." Noah nodded. "Mommy would like that," he said. Emily closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "She would." That night, Detective Bennett returned home exhausted. She poured a cup of coffee and sat alone in the quiet. Cases ended, but stories didn't. Sarah's story would live on, in her son, in her sister, in every person who heard her name. Bennett looked at the photo on her desk. Sarah, smiling, holding Noah as a baby. "You mattered," Bennett said softly. But even as the case closed, one question lingered. Not about Mark. Not about Daniel. But about the system. About how many people like Sarah tried to leave and never got the chance. And how many were still out there now, waiting. The first time Noah Mitchell asked about his mother, he was 6 years old. It was a quiet evening. The kind that settles gently, without noise or drama. Emily had just finished reading him a bedtime story. The lamp beside his bed cast a warm glow across the room, softening the edges of everything it touched. Noah stared at the ceiling for a long moment. "Aunt Emily?" he asked. "Yes, sweetheart. Do you think Mommy can see me?" Emily felt the question land in her chest like a weight. She sat on the edge of the bed and brushed Noah's hair back gently. "I think she can," she said. "And I think she's very proud of you." Noah nodded slowly. "I don't remember her voice," he said. "I remember her smell. Like soap and cookies." Emily smiled through tears. "That sounds like her," she whispered. Outside that bedroom, the world had moved on. The case had been closed. The headlines had faded. New stories had replaced Sarah Mitchell's in the endless cycle of news. But inside that room, Sarah was still alive. In memory. In love. In the space she left behind. Mark Mitchell spent his days in a concrete box. No windows. No control. No audience. The prison stripped him of everything he had used to define himself. His charm meant nothing there. His smiles earned no reactions. His words carried no weight. For the first time in his life, Mark was invisible. He filed appeals at first. Pages and pages filled with arguments about unfair treatment and misunderstanding. Every single one was denied. Eventually, the appeals stopped. Not because he felt regret, but because he understood something new. He had lost. Daniel Reeves took a plea deal. He would spend years behind bars, though not nearly as many as Mark. In court, he stood shaking, his voice barely holding together. "I failed her," he said. "She trusted me." No one clapped. No one forgave him. But his testimony ensured one thing. The truth was complete. Detective Laura Bennett attended Sarah Mitchell's memorial every year. She stood quietly at the back of the park where a small plaque rested beneath a flowering tree. Sarah Mitchell. Loving mother. Teacher. Survivor. Children played nearby. Parents laughed softly. Life continued. Bennett liked to watch the children. They reminded her why cases like Sarah's mattered. Why details mattered. Why listening mattered. Why believing mattered. She had seen too many victims dismissed as dramatic. Too many warnings ignored. Sarah had done everything right. And still, she paid the highest price. Emily dedicated her life to making sure Sarah's story didn't disappear. She spoke at schools, community centers, support groups. She told the story calmly, without anger. She wasn't weak, Emily would say. She was planning to leave. That takes strength. People listened. Some cried. Some asked questions. Some went home and saw their own lives differently. That was Sarah's legacy. When Noah turned 10, he asked to see the house where he was born. Emily hesitated, but she agreed. They stood across the street on a quiet afternoon. The house looked different now. New paint. New owners. New life. "That's it?" Noah asked. "Yes," Emily said. "It looks normal," he said. Emily nodded. "That's how it hides." Noah was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Mommy was brave, right?" Emily knelt beside him. "She was the bravest person I've ever known," she said. Years passed. Noah grew taller, stronger, kinder. He loved books, animals, helping people. On his high school graduation day, Emily watched him walk across the stage and felt Sarah beside her. After the ceremony, Noah hugged her tightly. "This is for her too," he said. Emily couldn't speak. One evening, long after the case had faded into textbooks and archives, Detective Bennett received a letter. It was handwritten. The return address was unfamiliar. She opened it slowly. "Detective Bennett, you don't know me. My name is Rachel. I left my husband last year. I was scared, but I remembered Sarah Mitchell. Her story saved my life." Bennett closed her eyes. The letter continued. "Thank you for telling the truth." Bennett folded the letter carefully and placed it in her desk drawer. Some cases never truly end. On the anniversary of Sarah's death, Emily and Noah visited the park together. Noah was 17 now. They sat on the bench beneath the tree. I wish I could remember her face better, Noah said. Emily reached into her bag and handed him a photo. Sarah stood smiling, holding a tray of cookies, flour on her cheek. Noah studied it quietly. She looks happy, he said. She was, Emily replied. Even when she was scared. Noah nodded. I think, he said slowly, that if she hadn't tried to leave, I wouldn't be here like this. Emily swallowed hard. No, she said. You're here because she loved you. That night, Noah wrote something for school. An essay about courage. He didn't name his mother. But every word was about her. Some heroes don't wear uniforms, he wrote. Some heroes are just trying to protect their children. The most heartbreaking part of Sarah Mitchell's story isn't how she died. It's how hard she tried to live. She planned. She prepared. She reached out. And even though she didn't survive, her actions saved others. Her voice still echoes. In every person who leaves. In every child who grows up safe. In every story told instead of silenced. Sarah Mitchell was not just a victim. She was a warning. And she was hope. Stories like Sarah's are hard to hear, but they matter. If this story moved you, or opened your eyes to how quiet danger can be, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. We share these stories to honor the victims, to spread awareness, and to remind others that they are not alone. Your support helps keep these stories alive. And sometimes, hearing one story is enough to save another life. Broken Heart, the story is heartbreaking, but necessary. What part of Sarah's story stayed with you the most? The warning signs? Her strength as a mother? Or how close she came to escaping? Share your thoughts respectfully below. Your voice matters, and someone reading your comment might need it today. Don't forget to subscribe for more true crime documentaries focused on truth, awareness, and justice.